You walk out to the shed and there it is. The axe head left out in the rain. The handsaw with the orange crust creeping up the blade. The shovel by the back wall, the cast iron skillet on the high shelf you forgot to oil. The wheelbarrow, the gate hinge. Rust. The slow eating of your good iron's tools by the air itself, until what was a clean tool your father gave you is a flaking ruin. Most folks fight rust the way the hardware store wants them to. A bottle of commercial rust converter, $15, $20, $30 for a small jar. A spray can that lasts a few months and you buy again. Year after year, paying and paying, watching your good iron slowly turn to powder. Why do you pay for this every year? How did they live without these expensive plastic bottles before? Now, sit with this. Stop and think. There is a fine powder you can buy for about $3 mixed in water that does something almost no one believes the first time they see it. You brush it on, and the rust itself turns into a hard, dark blue-black coating that protects the metal underneath. The rust does not just stop, it becomes the protection. The disease becomes the cure. That is not me being poetic. That is the chemistry written down in the books since 1813. My name is Elias Yoda. I am Amish and I farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I am going to be honest with you, because the claim of saving iron forever is bold, and you deserve to know what holds up plain and what holds up with an explanation. Honest is more useful than impressive. Before I go further, for the folks who want all of this, every method I show, all in one place, I have put it together in a book at my website, eliasyoda.com. I will not push it again. If you want it, it is there. Now stay with me. Let me tell you what is really happening. Once you see the simple chemistry of it, the rest makes plain sense. Rust, that orange, flaky stuff, is what happens when iron meets water and air and turns to iron oxide. The metal loses its tight form and becomes a soft, crumbly compound that just keeps spreading. Rust feeds rust. The orange creeps wider and deeper year after year until the tool gives way. Now, there is a thing in nature called tannin, or tannic acid. It is a fine powder, soft as flour, harvested from tree bark. It is what makes black tea taste dry on your tongue, what makes red wine pull at your cheeks, and what makes an oak leaf bitter. It is what old leather tanners used in their vats to turn hide into shoe leather. When tannin meets rust, they grab onto each other in a chemical handshake, and the orange flaky rust converts into a brand new compound called ferric tannate, a dark blue-black coating bonded tight to the metal underneath. Hard, stable, and most importantly, not eating the iron. This real chemistry was written up plain by a French chemist named Henri Braconnot in 1813. Even the Canadian Conservation Institute uses this exact procedure to keep museum iron artifacts safe for hundreds of years. This is not folk magic. It is honest chemistry. The same dark blue-black on antique ironwork that has lasted 300 years on a porch is ferric tannate. The same near-black ink in a medieval Bible that has held its color for 800 years is iron and tannin. Tannin and iron have been protecting each other longer than anyone alive can remember. Now I owe you the honest scope of what this works on. This works strictly on iron and steel, the things that rust orange. Tannic acid only handshakes with iron. Your axes, knives, hatchets, cast iron pans, truck frames, wheelbarrows, and gate hinges are all iron or steel, and the powder works on them all. It does not work on aluminum, brass, copper, zinc, or anything galvanized. They do not make orange rust, and the tannin has nothing to grab onto. Use it only for honest iron. And what about that word forever? The truth is more useful than a wild claim. It stops your rust in its tracks, turns it into a protective coating, and gives you metal that needs a small touch-up perhaps once a year, instead of new rust eating it down every season. That is what a practical man means by forever. Where are its honest limits? In harsh conditions, like sea air heavy with salt or roads. Salted in winter, the coating will degrade faster. Salt is the enemy of all metal protection. Furthermore, tannic acid alone on heavy rust does not bond as tightly as folks once thought. That is why we use a helper. The combination of tannic acid plus a touch of phosphoric acid, navel jelly, is what museum books call for. Together, they turn leftover rust into iron phosphate, creating a layer far more reliable than either one alone. Look at the back of a $15 jar of rust converter at the store next time you are in town. You will see the same words, tannic acid. A system that makes its money on you not knowing has no reason to teach you. The old knowledge of the blacksmiths and simple country chemists has quietly stopped being passed down, and the hardware aisle has taken over. The bag has been on the shelf the whole time. Most folks have just never been told to ask for it. You are being told now. To do this right, you only need a few simple things that cost $5 or $6 altogether. First is food-grade tannic acid powder. A small bag costs $3 to $5 online and treats roughly 40 square feet of rusted metal. Second is a small jar of navel jelly for $2 or $3. Third is distilled water, $1 a gallon at the grocery store, because tap water has minerals and chlorides that make iron rust worse. Finally, you just need some steel wool or a stiff wire brush to prep the metal, a plastic cup, and an old cotton rag or foam brush to apply it. Now, you have your tools gathered. You have the rusty axe head or the old wheelbarrow sitting on your workbench. You have the brown powder that smells faintly of the woods, the clear distilled water, and the blue gel of the navel jelly. How exactly do we mix these together in the precise proportions the museum conservators use? How do we prepare that flaking orange metal without making the one mistake that ruins the entire reaction? And what exactly does it look like when the orange iron begins to shift colors right before your eyes? Preparing the metal. The first big mistake. Let's begin with the metal itself. Take a look at that tool on your bench. It is covered in that dry, crusty orange coat. Your first instinct, the one the hardware store taught you, is to grab a piece of heavy sandpaper, an emery cloth, or a wire wheel on an angle grinder, and sweat until you see bright, shiny silver metal. Stop and think. If you do that, you have just thrown away the very ingredient you need. Understand this. The tannin cannot do its work on bare, clean iron. It needs the rust. The rust is the foundation of the protective layer we are about to build. Without it, the solution will just sit on top of the smooth metal like dirty water and dry into a useless brown film that peels off with your fingernail. So, here is how you prepare the iron properly. Knock off the loose flakes. Take your stiff wire brush or a wad of coarse steel wool. Rub the tool down with a firm, steady hand. You are listening for a change in sound. From the rough, crispy crunch of loose rust to the dull, solid scratch of firm metal underneath. Leave the tight rust. If a patch of orange rust doesn't fly off as dust when you scrub it with the wire brush, leave it right where it is. That tight, stubborn rust is exactly what we are going to convert. Clean away the grease. If the tool has old motor oil, fingerprint grease, or pine sap on it, wipe it down with a rag dampened with a bit of rubbing alcohol or plain soapy water. Grease acts like a shield, and the water-based powder mix cannot bite through it. Let it dry completely. When you are done, your tool should look dull and dark orange, but it should be smooth to the touch, with no loose flakes falling off when you tap it against the wood of your bench. You will have a pile of orange powder on your workspace. Wipe that away. Now the iron is hungry for the cure. Mixing the recipe. A century-old ratio now. We step to the mixing table. Put on your rubber gloves and your safety glasses here. Even though this is old, gentle chemistry, the phosphoric acid in the navel jelly will sting a fresh cut on your hand, and you do not want a stray splash in your eye. Take your clean plastic container. We do not use metal cups for mixing this because the solution will start trying to convert the cup before it ever touches your tool. Plain text the master formula. 100 milliliters, just under 1/2 cup of warm distilled water. 4 grams, about 1 level teaspoon, of tannic acid powder. 5 milliliters, about 1 teaspoon of phosphoric acid navel jelly. Step 1. The water and the powder. Pour your warm distilled water into the cup. It must be warm, not boiling, just comfortable to the touch. Warm water coaxes the powder to dissolve without clumping. Now, open your bag of tannic acid. Look at it close. It is a beautiful tan-colored powder, soft as flour, and it smells distinctly of the deep woods, like walking through a grove of oaks after a hard autumn rain. Measure out your level teaspoon and drop it into the water. Take a clean wooden stick or an old plastic spoon and stir. Watch the water change. It goes from clear to a deep translucent amber, then quickly darkens to the color of strong black coffee or boiled oak bark. Stir until you see no more granules sitting at the bottom. Step 2. Adding the helper next. Take your navel jelly. It is usually a thick pinkish gel that smells faintly sour and sharp. Scoop out a teaspoon of it and drop it into your dark amber liquid. Stir it well. The gel will look like it doesn't want to dissolve at first, floating in little pink ribbons through the dark tea. Keep your hand moving in steady circles. Within a minute or two, the phosphoric acid will break down and blend completely into the liquid. The mixture might turn a shade darker, becoming a deep, opaque brown-black. That is your solution. It is thin, fluid, and ready. The application. Watching the handshake happen, take your foam brush or your old cotton rag and dip it into the liquid. You don't need to soak it until it drips. A light dampness is all it takes. The first coat, begin brushing the solution onto the rusted iron. Work in long, even strokes. Make sure you push the liquid into every pitted mark, every crack around the rivets, and every small crevice where the orange rust has dug its teeth into the metal. Now, pause and watch closely. This is the moment that surprises everyone who sees it for the first time. 1. The metal looks wet and dark brown, like you just spilled tea on an old log. 5. The bright orange spots start to dull. They lose their fiery color and turn a muddy slate gray, Mono 15. The gray deepens. It turns to a rich purple-brown, then settles into a heavy dark charcoal, Mono 30. The transition is complete. Where there was flaky orange rust, there is now a hard, matte, blue-black shield. That is the ferric tannate forming in front of your eyes. The tannin is locking arms with the iron oxide, changing its very nature, the second layer. Why haste ruins the work here is where the second biggest beginner's mistake happens. Impatience. A man sees the tool turn black, thinks the job is done, and goes right to using it. Or he sees a thin spot and immediately slaps a heavy second coat over the wet metal. Listen to this. One thick, heavy coat of this solution dries into a skin that traps wetness underneath. It will look good for a week, and then the whole layer will bubble up and peel off like sunburned skin, exposing fresh rust underneath. You must work in thin coats, and you must let the clock do its work. Leave the tool alone for 2 to 4 hours. If the air is damp or the shed is cool, give it the full 4 hours. Let it dry until it is completely matte, with no shiny wet patches remaining. It should look like a piece of iron retrieved from an old blacksmith's shop. Dull, dark, and uniform. Once it is bone dry, dip your brush again. Apply a second thin coat exactly like the first. This second layer finds any microscopic pinholes the first coat missed, reinforcing the shield and making the blue-black conversion twice as dense. Let this coat dry for another full 4 hours, or better yet, leave it on the bench overnight. The final barrier. Sealing the cure. When you wake up the next morning and look at your tool, it will be completely transformed. The orange disease is gone, replaced by a deep, dark, historic finish. But we are not quite finished. The ferric tannate stops the rust, but it is still a porous layer. If you leave it exposed to a heavy downpour, water can eventually seep through the pores and find the raw iron deep beneath. We need to seal the shield. For hand tools and garden gear, take a clean rag and pour a few drops of boiled linseed oil or melted beeswax onto it. Rub it firmly into the black metal. The dry ferric tannate will drink the oil right up. The dull gray black will instantly deepen into a magnificent, rich, semi-gloss black that looks like old gun steel. Wipe off any excess so it isn't sticky. For vehicle frames or undercarriages, you can now spray a standard rubberized undercoating or a chassis paint right over this black layer. The paint will stick to the ferric tannate far better than it ever would have stuck to bare steel or raw rust for cast iron skillets. Simply place the black pan into a 350-degree oven with a thin smear of lard or flaxseed oil for an hour to bake on your food-safe seasoning. Your tool is now restored, protected by the very substance that was trying to destroy it. But a question remains for the thoughtful craftsman. Now that you know how to convert the rust on your tools, using this simple $3 kitchen mixture, how do you maintain the working edges of those tools so they never need this kind of rescue again? How do you keep the steel sharp enough to shave with, using nothing but the old methods of the farm? The unseen handshake. The simple science of the cure. Now that you have seen the transformation with your own eyes, it is time to look under the surface. I am a farmer, not a university professor, but my father always told me that a man who knows how to do a thing will always have a job. But the man who knows why it works will be the master of his craft. Let us look at why that orange crust changes its nature. Understand this: rust is not just dirt sitting on top of your tool. It is the iron itself, dying. When raw iron is exposed to moisture and the oxygen in the air, a slow chemical fire takes place. The oxygen marries the iron, creating iron oxide. Stop and think. Think of raw iron like a tightly stacked pile of firewood. It is solid, heavy, and leaves no gaps. But when it turns to rust, it is like that same wood burning down into loose, fluffy ash. The ash takes up more space than the wood did. It has no strength, and it lets water pass right through it. Because rust is porous like a sponge, it constantly draws moisture deeper down into the good unburned iron beneath. The disease feeds on itself until the whole tool is gone. When you brush our tannic acid solution onto that orange ash, a wonderful thing happens. Tannin is a massive, complex organic molecule built by trees to protect themselves from fungi and pests. It has hundreds of tiny chemical hooks on it. The moment it touches the loose iron atoms in the rust, those hooks grab hold. They pull the loose iron into a tight, cross-linked grid. It is like taking a pile of loose, dry sand and pouring liquid cement through it. The sand doesn't disappear. It gets locked into a solid, waterproof stone. That stone is ferric tannate, the blue-black shield you see on the metal. It is no longer a sponge. It is a dense, non-porous wall that seals out oxygen and water completely. The pink gel. Why the helper matters, you might wonder. Why we bothered to stir that teaspoon of pink navel jelly. The phosphoric acid. Into our wood-scented tea. Tannic acid by itself is a gentle worker. On very light, fresh rust, it can do the job alone. But on an old tool that has been sitting in a damp barn for 20 years, the rust is thick, uneven, and stubborn. The tannic acid molecules are large, and they can get lazy. Sitting on the top layer of rust without digging down to the bottom, the phosphoric acid is the scout that clears the path. It is a true acid, sharp and aggressive. When you apply the mix, the phosphoric acid immediately eats through the microscopic oil residues and cuts into the dense outer crust of the rust, opening up tiny pathways. This allows the tannin molecules to pour deep down into the very base of the corrosion, right where the rust meets the healthy iron. Furthermore, the phosphoric acid performs its own secondary miracle. It reacts with any microscopic bits of raw iron it finds, turning them into iron phosphate, which dries into a hard, dull, gray protective crystalline layer. So, under your brush, you are not just getting one defense. You are getting a double lock. The blue-black ferric tannate armor on top, and a gray iron phosphate primer, bonded to the solid steel below. That is why the two together hold up where store-bought sprays fail, the honest limits. Where the powder fails now. I owe you the plain truth about the boundaries of this method. There are folks on the internet who will tell you this is a magical potion that solves every metal problem under the sun. That is foolishness. Everything in nature has its place where it works, and its place where it is useless. Let us lay out the honest boundaries, plain and clear, so you do not waste your time or your ingredients. 1. The material limits it only works on iron and steel. This includes cast iron, carbon steel, wrought iron, and low alloy steels. If it can rust a bright, fiery orange, this solution will treat it. It does nothing for non-ferrous metals. If you brush this onto oxidized aluminum, green copper tarnished brass, or corroded bronze, you will get nothing but a sticky, brown mess that washes off in the rain. There are no iron atoms in those metals for the tannin to handshake with. It will not work on stainless steel or galvanized iron. Stainless steel has chromium mixed into it, which creates its own invisible shield. Galvanized steel is coated in zinc. The tannin cannot bite into them because there is no true iron rust present, too. The structural limits it cannot resurrect dead iron. If your wheelbarrow or your truck frame has rusted so deeply that you can push your thumb right through the metal, this powder will not weld it back together. It does not replace missing steel. It only saves what is left. It turns existing rust into a protective shell. If the tool is already a structural skeleton, it belongs in the scrap heap, not the mixing cup. It fails on thick, loose scale. If you refuse to use the wire brush first, and you paint this mix over thick potato chip flakes of loose rust, the chemical reaction will still happen. The flakes will turn black and hard. But within a few weeks, those heavy flakes will simply crack and fall off the tool due to vibration or gravity, taking your new coating with them. The prep work is non-negotiable. Bull 3. The environmental limits the salt exception. If you live 3 blocks from the ocean, where the air is thick with saltwater mist, or if you drive your treated truck daily on northern winter roads white with road salt, this coating will not last a year. Salt contains chlorides, which are highly aggressive chemical instigators. They will eventually worm their way through the ferric tannate layer and restart the orange fire beneath. In those harsh places, you must inspect the metal and apply your thin touch-up coat 2 or 3 times a year instead of just once, the high heat exception. This formula is wonderful for the outside of a wood-burning stove or a heavy cast iron gate hinge, but do not use it on the inside of a firebox or on an exhaust manifold of an engine where temperatures exceed 500 degrees. At those extreme temperatures, the organic tannin molecules will simply char and cook away into smoke, leaving the iron bare to the fire. Understanding these boundaries doesn't make the method less valuable. It makes you a wiser craftsman. You now know exactly when to reach for the brown powder and exactly what to expect when you do. Now that the science is plain and the limits are drawn, we must look at the true test of any traditional solution: how it behaves over the long seasons of a working life. How does a tool treated this way handle the sweat of a day's labor in the field? And what happens when the black shield finally begins to wear down after years of hard use? The lineage of the shield. From scribes to shipwrights, the things we have talked about today are not new inventions. They are a continuation of a line that stretches back further than the foundations of the county I farm in. For centuries, the relationship between tannin and iron was something men lived with daily, even if they did not have the letters behind their name to explain the molecular structure. Understand this. The very words that shaped our history were written with this exact chemical handshake. Stop and think. If you look at a handwritten Bible from the Middle Ages, or the early draft of a historical document from the 1700s, you will notice the ink is not a faded charcoal or a washed-out blue. It is a deep, rich, near black that has bitten into the parchment and stayed there for hundreds of years. That ink was called iron gall ink. The old monks and scribes made it by crushing oak galls, the hard, round swellings found on oak twigs, which are packed with the purest tannic acid nature produces, and mixing them with green vitriol, which is what they called iron sulfate. When the wood juice met the iron, it instantly turned into that permanent dark blue-black compound. They did not use it to protect metal back then. They used it because they knew that once iron and tannin joined hands, neither time nor light, nor air could easily wash the mark away. It wasn't until the early 19th century that men began to write down how this same ink could be used to defend the iron itself. In 1813, a French chemist and botanist named Henri Braconnot sat at his laboratory bench and isolated the reaction between tannic acid and iron oxides. He wasn't trying to sell a product. He was simply cataloging the laws of the creation. Soon after, old shipmasters and wagon builders began using oak bark infusions to dress the ironwork on sailing vessels and heavy freight wagons. They would boil the bark in great iron cauldrons until the water was thick and dark, then drop their forged hinges, chains, and bolts directly into the brew. The iron came out black, matte, and ready to face the salt air and the heavy mud of the trail. They called it blackling the iron, and it kept the woodwork from rotting around the fasteners because the treated iron stopped weeping orange rust into the timber. The modern verdict: bulletins and bulletproof proof as the industrial age took over. We became a people who preferred to buy a solution in a tin rather than boil bark in a kettle. The old knowledge quietly retreated to two places: the small, plain farms where people still look after what they own, and the high archives of international museums. In the mid-20th century, museum curators faced a massive problem. They were pulling ancient iron swords, iron cannons, and colonial tools out of the ground, and from old shipwrecks. The moment these artifacts met the air, they began to flash rust and rot away right in the display cases. The museum men couldn't use greasy oils or heavy commercial paints because those coatings would hide the historic details and trap moisture underneath, destroying the artifact from the inside out. They needed a treatment that was completely stable, microscopic in thickness, and scientifically proven to halt decay for centuries. They went back to the old books and resurrected the handshake between the tree and the iron. The Canadian Conservation Institute, CCI. If you want the absolute documentary proof of this method, you can look up CCI Note 95, titled Tannic Acid Coating for Rusted Iron Artifacts. This is the official bulletin published by the government professionals who look after Canada's national treasures. In that document, authors like Lindsay Selwyn lay out the exact instructions. They call for a 2 to 3% solution of tannic acid powder dissolved in distilled water, adjusted with a small drop of phosphoric acid to a precise acidity level. It is the exact formula I gave you in Part 2. Canada.ca is Show 1, the Henry Ford Museum, in their official technical guidelines for the conservation of historic industrial machinery. They prescribe the exact same tannic acid treatment to stabilize rusted iron before applying microcrystalline wax, the military tests. In the late 20th century, industrial researchers conducted comparative studies on naturally rusted steel panels. They tested 5 different types of rust treatments, comparing raw tannic acid recipes against high-priced commercial rust converters. The studies showed that while the commercial brands added thick vinyl polymers to create a shiny skin, the pure tannic phosphoric solution achieved the cleanest, deepest chemical conversion of the underlying iron oxide. BigCoop.com. This is the authority that sits behind that $3 cup of brown liquid on your workbench. It is not an old wives' tale, and it is not a secret hidden by a secret society. It is honest, peer-reviewed science that has been sitting on the library shelves for over 200 years, waiting for someone to reach out and use it. The invitation. Bring back the good iron now. We have come to the end of the explanation, and the rest is up to you. I did not make this video to entertain you, or to give you something interesting to think about while you sit in your chair. I made it because I want you to reclaim a piece of your own independence. Every time we run to the store to buy a $15 bottle of chemical spray that lasts 3 months, or every time we throw a rusty old hoe or a socket wrench into the trash because it looks ugly, we are letting go of a little bit of the self-reliance our grandfathers took for granted. We are trading our knowledge for their merchandise. So, here is my invitation to you for this coming week. Gather the elements. Spend the $5 or $6. Order that small bag of food-grade tannic acid powder online. Pick up a $3 jar of navel jelly at the local hardware store and grab a $1 jug of distilled water from the grocery aisle. Choose your patient. Walk out to your shed, your barn, or your basement. Find that one tool that you have been ignoring because the orange crust has made it look useless. Maybe it is your father's old camping hatchet, a heavy gate hinge that screeches every time the wind blows, or that old cast iron skillet your grandmother used that has been gathering dust on the high shelf. Perform the cure. Put on your safety glasses and your gloves. Mix the liquid until it smells of the autumn woods. Knock off the loose flakes. Brush the amber tea onto the metal, and just sit there for 15 minutes. Watch the orange turn to gray, and watch the gray settle into that deep, quiet blue-black shield. Once you see that transformation happen under your own brush, something will shift in your mind. You will stop looking at rust as a disaster that forces you to spend money, and you will start looking at it as raw material waiting to be turned into a shield. You will realize that you have the power to save your own tools with nothing more than a few pennies and a little bit of patience. Tell me in the comments below, what is the rustiest tool you have been meaning to bring back? Is it an old axe, a crosscut saw, a truck frame, or a wheelbarrow? Tell me what it is, and once you have mixed the powder and tried it, come back to this page and tell me what changed when you watched the iron turn dark right under your brush. I read every single one of your words. Next time, since we have spent today learning how to save the body of the iron and steel you already own, I am going to show you the traditional way my people sharpen and re-edge a dull axe, a dull knife, or a worn pair of shears. We will talk about how a tool you thought was completely finished can come back to an edge better than the day it left the factory. Using nothing more than a simple bench stone, a leather strop, and 10 minutes of your time. It is the natural next step after today. Don't throw the rusty one away. Clean it with the tree bark, keep it greased, and bring it back to the work. Until next time, keep your tools clean and your path plain.